Jake Wood played offensive tackle for the Wisconsin Badgers, graduated in 2005, and inspired by Pat Tillman, enlisted in the Marines as a private. He graduated at the top of his scout sniper class, deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan with one of the highest casualty units of both wars, and came home with the Navy Marine Corps Commendation Medal with Valor. He watched his unit lose more men to suicide than to enemy fire overseas. Super important issue. In January 2010, 3 days after the Haiti earthquake, he called a buddy and said, "Will you go to Haiti with me?" 8 people showed up. They crossed a river and went to areas other 8 organizations said were too dangerous, treated thousands of patients in camps no one else would enter, and came home and incorporated, as you might know it or have heard of it, Team Rubicon. 11 years later, 200,000 volunteers, nearly 1,200 disasters, and approximately $450 million raised. After building one of the largest disaster relief organizations in the US, he handed the reins to his COO and went on to build Groundswell, a venture-backed platform that makes donor-advised funds a standard employee benefit. Google Ventures led the seed, and Moonshots was right there alongside them. BNY Mellon, Under Armour, and the New York Stock Exchange are on the platform. And in 5 years, they haven't churned a single enterprise customer, not one. I was excited to meet Jake in 2018. I asked him to speak to an amazing group of Service Academy graduates who, as a lot of you know, are typically officers. And this, it's not former Marine. I think you're just always a Marine, kind of. But he had us literally in stitches. He had us inspired, explaining who did all the work in the military, not the officers, the enlisted. Also showed us a lot of tattoos, but mostly really inspired us. So we at Moonshots are super proud to have backed Jake and would like to welcome him up here. Look how big he is.
Well, thank you for that.
Are you hot?
I think I'm, yeah.
All right, awesome. I'm really glad you're here. So Haiti, January of 2010, 2 months out of the Marine Corps, you see earthquake coverage on TV, and you decide it would be a good idea to call your buddies and say, hey, let's go to Haiti. You got 8 people that showed up, and you did all this work. Like, talk about that spark, the inspiration. What was going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a combination of an overinflated sense of self, which is common among Marines, but obviously this horrific event that had just happened. And I couldn't help but think, as I was watching these events unfold in Port-au-Prince and the surrounding the capital, how similar that environment was to the experiences I just had overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan. You had this death, this destruction, this despair, the chaos that's inherent. I mean, Haiti was the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere. It was dysfunctional before the earthquake. It was, an apocalypse afterward. And my plan had not been to get into, I was getting out of the Marine Corps. I was going to go get my MBA because, like anybody that gets an MBA, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And it just was this natural opportunity. Like the stars just kind of aligned. And I often think of, there's a lot of great mottos across elite military units. One that's always spoken to me was actually from the British SAS, which is "He who dares wins." And in that moment, I think a lot of people feel inspired to act in these moments of, extreme circumstance, and then a lot of people make excuses for why they're not going to do it. But it's in these moments that he who dares wins, and in this case, winning was helping thousands of people that were experiencing the worst trauma that you could even fathom and imagine. So,
Yeah, so the solution you came up with and evolved into Team Rubicon it did 2 things, right? You were actually at the point of most pain going to help people who are in dire need, but you also created an infrastructure for some other people that had a need, right? So can you talk about that? It's like a 2-sided marketplace, right? All the former military who, as we know, have a horrible, level of suicide rate, but that, purpose-driven mission that drives a lot of us drove you to decide to go do that. Like, What was the decision, and how did you think about, and how did it evolve for Team Rubicon?
Yeah, well, I mean, let's back up. While we were in Port-au-Prince and we were running these operations on the ground, it just kind of dawned on us that all we were really doing was taking these counterinsurgency tactics that we had been trained on and had honed and had executed overseas, and using them in this new humanitarian post-disaster environment. And so it was logical to us to think that we could build a better, more effective, more efficient disaster response organization by leveraging the skills and experiences of the 3 million men and women we'd sent overseas to Iraq and Afghanistan, who had come home, who were getting out of the military, and where, as a nation, we were allowing those skills and experiences to just atrophy, right? It didn't make sense. And so we incorporated the nonprofit on this premise of, let's recruit and repurpose those skills for disaster response, humanitarian relief. And it was very quick. We saw what you just were referencing, which was that the men and women who were participating in these missions, we were getting as much out of it as they were putting into it. They were rediscovering the sense of purpose that they had while they were in the service. They were finding a new band of brothers and sisters similar to what they'd had when they were in a Ranger platoon or a truck company. And they had a new uniform. I mean, like literally, that's that uniform that we gave them to go downrange gave them this sense of pride again that was so powerful in helping their transition from military service to this post-civilian life. And we saw just these profound impacts. And you called it a marketplace, and that really was, I think, the key to the massive and rapid scale that we experienced over the first decade. We had to turn volunteers away. I mean, they were beating down our doors to be deployed to crises around the world and across the country.
That's phenomenal. 200,000 plus volunteers, a culture of belonging and having a purpose. Talk about the transition from that at Team Rubicon to Groundswell, like what you could argue is kind of a financial product. So how does that transfer?
Yeah, well, so I ran Team Rubicon as CEO for 11 years, best job in the world. I think at a certain point, I wanted to be an entrepreneur again. We were a big organization, big team. I was surrounded by really competent executives that made me look good, but made me also feel irrelevant. And I got to a point where I started to think about what the next thing was going to be, and I wanted to stay in the impact sector. I wanted to do something still that was meaningful. Those are harder to come by on the for-profit side. And a few things that we'd observed. One was the rapid rise in the use of donor-advised funds by high-net-worth families. A lot of people in this room may or may not know what a donor-advised fund is. I'm sure plenty of people in here have one, but it's a tax-advantaged charitable giving vehicle, almost like the lightweight version of a private foundation. And over the last decade, they've just exploded in popularity, but they were still only accessible by, say, the top 1% of households in the US. And so we were seeing that, and we saw the tailwinds there. We also saw that the way that companies were engaging their employees in giving was largely ineffective. They were using outdated technology, and it had negative impacts on the nonprofits that they were supporting through those programs. The money was 90 days delayed. There was just real challenges there. And so we saw this opportunity, similar to Team Rubicon, solve multiple challenges with the same single product or solution, which was, okay, how do you make donor advised funds more accessible? Okay, let's make them an employee benefit. Companies give you a 401k for retirement, an HSA for health. Why don't companies provide donor advised funds to employees? 75% of American households are given to charity every year. Like, let's give them this tool to do that more effectively. Okay, that makes sense. Now let's improve the cash flow dynamics for nonprofits so that they become the evangelists of this product and help us in that go-to-market, build that brand, create a demand signal back from those enterprises. And so we've been able, it's taken 5 years, but we finally have turned that corner where by engaging these employees, improving the experience for the companies, but also, again, building with that nonprofit in mind, we've created this three-way this solution that impacts all three of those stakeholders in a really positive way.
So it's very hard to build startups, right?
I wish somebody would have told me.
Some people say if they knew how hard it was, they wouldn't have started it sometimes, so they don't. So you have, watching you speak before, I've seen you talk about, specific leadership postures, right? Clarity of mind when surrounded by chaos, having to make decisions with incomplete information, but still being able to communicate effectively and get your team moving. It sounds good, it's easy to say, hard to do. Like, how do you stay grounded in that? Especially in the startup when it's nothing certain.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to, 3 or 4 years ago when the SVB collapse happened. I was actually giving a talk on leading in chaos in Las Vegas. It was like a room of 3,000 people. It was like the sales kickoff for some big technology company. Giving a talk on leading through chaos. I get off the stage, I go to the green room, my cell phone is on a table. It's like smoking, it's vibrating. So, and one of the text messages that I first read was from Kelly, and he's just asked, hey, where's Groundswell keep its money? I thought, like, that's a really funny question. Are you in the market for a new bank, Kelly? So I obviously that kicks off the craziest 48 hours I've ever had as an entrepreneur. We had $10 million at SVB. We couldn't get it. And total uncertainty about whether or not it was gone. Was the Fed going to come in? Was it going to be rescued? Were we going to be made whole? And I remember sitting down with my team. We had 25, 30 employees, and I just looked them in the eye and I said, hey, team, I'm going to be honest. I don't know what's going to happen. We may be extinct come Monday. I can tell you as of right now, I cannot pay you. Payroll was in 24 or 48 hours. But I kind of laid out, I said, I don't know what's happening here, but here's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to update you every 4 hours through the night as I learn more about the situation and as the situation unfolds. And I think like the lesson there is acknowledge what you don't know in these moments. Like, don't be afraid to be transparent with your team. Don't bluff. Don't fake it. Invite them into the problem. Trust them to have a perspective that can assist you in building toward that solution. Over-communicate in those moments. People are naturally afraid when they're uncertain. It's a natural reaction, that fear. So acknowledge that fear is natural, and then work to control it. And then the last thing, I mean, any leader that's been in combat knows this. Panic is contagious, right? So your job as CEO is to be unflappable in those moments. That doesn't mean, again, that you're bluffing. It means that, hey, you're calm in communicating what it is that you do and don't know, can and can't do. And the good news about, panic being contagious is everything else about leadership is also contagious. Courage is contagious. Calm is contagious. So what you do is going to be mirrored by the people that you're leading, and that's just the mindset that you have to have in those moments.
You've also talked publicly about humility, right, as one of the most, I guess, underrated or under-discussed leadership traits. And I'm going to brag on you. We don't have any other startups that have zero customer churn. And we certainly don't have any startups that have zero employee churn. So how do you build that, people waiting in line to volunteer for Team Rubicon, customers not leaving, employees not leaving, and how does the humility weave into that? Because those are very remarkable.
I'll try to tie those two things together. I think as much as I talk about humility being this kind of superpower for leaders, I think it's got to be paired with vulnerability. You have to surround yourself with people and, again, allow them to come and show you your faults or to question you. Now, again, we come from the military. It's like, hey, when I give you an order, we're going to go and we're going to execute that order. It's disagree but commit. But before you get to that point in time, you have to invite people in, to that solution. I think the culture that I've always tried to build is one that does the things that don't scale. So when you talk about like not churning a customer, it's, we've churned some of our like ankle biter SMB customers, but mid-market and above, any AC, any contract valued over $20,000 in 5 years, we've never churned one of those customers. And it's because they feel like an absolute hero with Groundswell. Like we do the things that don't scale. Like I sold a contract 4 years ago to a company for $20,000. Now we have $250,000, $500,000 contracts. You would think that we're not paying as much attention to that person. I am still calling that customer when I'm flying to Chicago. I'm going to take that customer out for coffee. I'm going to take that customer out for dinner. It's doing those things that don't scale. And people, they say that's kind of a foolish approach. How can you possibly commit to that? I wrote about this on LinkedIn recently. It's less that I can't scale that, because I certainly can't. I'm one person. But again, the actions that I take and demonstrate permeate every layer of the organization. And so every member of my team approaches their job with that same fanatical obsession with making people in this case our customers, or people in this case our employees, feel like they're valued, because they are. And so we're really proud of it. I mean, the not having a single employee turnover in 2.5 years, they were tough 2.5 years. I mean, it's not like, we're some rocket ship that everybody's just clinging on to, rest and invest in. I mean, we're a successful company now, but 2.5 years ago, we were in the valley of death. But they stuck with it because they show up every day and they feel like they belong there.
Yeah, that purpose is super important. To the thesis of Groundswell, so as a not-for-profit, you raised $400 million for Team Rubicon, plus or minus. What did that teach you about philanthropy, and how did it blend into your product roadmap and what you do with Groundswell?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the questions I asked myself when I set out to start the next thing, was what have I become an expert in? Disaster response, and there were some interesting business concepts that could have come out of that. Unfortunately, that's a business with a lot of tailwinds. But philanthropy was something, having raised several $100 million, that I felt like I knew a lot about. And listen, there's a lot that's happening in this country, right? The previous speaker talked about, the elimination of a lot of government funding for research. Well, that's happening across a lot of social services in our community. And people can argue whether that's the right move politically and economically or not. The fact of the matter is it has happened. And the services that are required in our communities are zero sum. If we eliminate that money from the federal government, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's got to come from somewhere else, because otherwise our communities will begin to fall apart if that void is not filled. And so there is a role for philanthropy to step up. Again, the donor advised funds were an interesting trend. It's interesting to see what's going to happen with the One Big Beautiful Bill and some of the really, I think, challenging provisions of that related to philanthropy, both at the corporate and individual giving level, that we'll see the impacts of in 12 months. And I think some of those provisions may have to get clawed back. But all of these things have created an interesting environment for what we're doing at Groundswell. I think that philanthropy is deeply ingrained in the DNA of this country. 2/3 to 3/4 of American households give to charity every year. It doesn't matter where you are on the socioeconomic spectrum. And in fact, people lower on the socioeconomic spectrum give a higher percentage of their household earnings to charity than people near the top. So this is something that kind of goes up and down society. And everything that we have built has been informed by that environment that I just outlined, but again, that experience having executed $400 million of raise.
So Craig and I, when we're describing extraordinary leadership, our kind of first go-to is, military veteran, for obvious and authentic reasons. And then we casually throw out frequently, NCAA Division I team athletes. They also like multiple founders, multiple times founding. So, you like checked boxes we didn't even know we had when we met you and talked to you about what you were doing. And we have a lot of founders in the room right now. So if you could leave them with, one thing as they're building and going through like what you did 2.5 years ago when, I'd visit you and you were definitely sweating from what was going on. What's the most important thing that you would ground them in?
Yeah, people ask me, how did you learn to become a founder or an entrepreneur? And I tell them I learned it in the Marine Corps. Two takeaways, two lessons. The Marine Corps has this fanatical obsession with these three words: speed, surprise, violence of action. Right? There's this concept in the Marine Corps doctrine, warfighting doctrine, that any battlefield strategy is a good one. Doesn't matter, like it could be good or bad, but it's good so long as you execute that strategy with speed, surprise, and violence of action. And that translates to what it is that you're doing. How fast can you move in how you go to market, build your product, recruit your team, make decisions, surprise, like what's the cunning that you're using? Like how are you sneaking up on the competition? What are you, and I don't necessarily mean building in stealth, but like how are you inside the heads of your competitors? And then violence of action. I mean, what that means, translating that for the people in the room who've never seen combat, this is just like you throw everything you have into that work. You overwhelm it with just grit and determination and overwhelming firepower. And then the last one is just perseverance. I'm not very good at my job. I just don't give up. And if I wanted somebody to say, what is Jake above anything else? Doesn't quit. Just don't quit.
Don't quit. Thank you, Jake.